Before diving into this incredible story, consider subscribing to the channel and hitting the bell. Every story here has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. Play for me, slave, what she said to this black woman. But she didn't know who she really was. One summer morning in Charleston, in South Carolina, golden light slid lazily across the pastel-shuttered facades, bouncing off wrought iron balconies and century-old red bricks. The air, already warm despite the early hour, carried the scent of jasmine and warm bread, mingled with the salty sea spray from the nearby harbor. In the historic quarter, carriages passed slowly, pulled by docile old horses whose steady breathing could be heard between the rumble of their wheels on the cobblestones. These picturesque scenes, so popular with tourists, reflected a past that some preferred to paint in sepia. But for others, these ancient stones still whispered the pain of a faded memory. Chains, muffled cries, and enforced silences. It is in the shade of a sycamore tree at the corner of King Street that Elena Brooks sat down, as she had done every day for the past 3 years. She wore a long, flowing skirt, a cream linen blouse, and a straw hat worn by the southern sun. Her bearing, though modest, retained a nobility in the carriage of her head, a dignity in the way she bent her knees to sit, slowly, carefully. She took out of its case an old violin, worn by the years, with its faded mahogany highlights. It was her grandmother's gift, Evelyn Brooks, a strong woman who had raised her alone Savannah, and who had passed on to him not only an instrument, but a legacy, the certainty that even in the midst of chaos, beauty can emerge from a bow placed on 4 strings. This violin, although damaged, still vibrated with this story. It had seen the first scenes of Elena, the auditions at the Juilliard School, the feverish competitions, the European tours, the packed houses, the standing ovations. He had sung under the gilded ceilings of Vienna, cried in the hushed theaters of Tokyo, and laughed in the open squares of Montreal. He had been her companion in light. But the light went out suddenly, one pouring rain on Route 17, just after a concert. A hit-and-run driver, a speeding pickup truck, the shock, the silence, then months of hospitalization, rehabilitation, and doubt. His left arm, the one that carried the notes, held the fretboard, drew the music, had been broken, literally, and with it, his future. The doctors had said she could perform again. Maybe, but not like before. Not with the same precision, not with the same speed, and above all, not for the same scenes. The big houses had quickly replaced her. The agents had stopped calling. The bills had piled up like unfinished scores. Depression had crept into the silences between 2 heartbeats. And yet, Elena had never stopped playing. Slowly at first, painfully, then patiently. Each note became a battle won against oblivion. So she turned towards the street, not out of resignation, but because, for her, playing was an act of survival, an act of faith. Every morning, when she placed her open case in front of her, it was not to beg, but to give a trace of beauty to those who passed by, to give a music that is no longer found in luxury boutiques, but in the discreet courage of those who stand firm. She watched passers-by without judgment, women in a hurry in heels, tourists in flip-flops, businessmen on the phone, children eating melting ice cream. She played for everyone, without exception, and sometimes, without warning, someone would stop, listen, and shed a tear. That day, at the hour when the heat rippled on the sidewalks like a floating veil, a black SUV with tinted windows sparked slowly in front of the Hermes boutique King Street. The roar of the engine died away with the arrogant nonchalance of people who know neither urgency nor necessity. A woman got out of the back door, Patricia Whitmore. With her wide-brimmed ivory straw hat, Dior sunglasses, and Chanel dress that fit perfectly around her slender figure, she embodied the old Southern aristocracy that had transformed a shameful past into a respectable fortune. Heir to a long line of planters, whose lands once stretched as far as the eye could see in northern Georgia, Patricia wore her heritage like an invisible jewel, heavy with history and pride. At his side, 2 equally well-dressed women, Meredith Caldwell, with blood-red nails and a sharp voice, and Lila Jennings, an overly tanned blonde, known for her hollow laugh and her fake charitable commitments. As they were about to cross the threshold of the shop, the sound of a violin stopped them in their tracks. A clear yet deep sound, fragile yet powerful, a voice from another world. The notes drifted softly, insinuating themselves between the windows, brushing against the silk dresses, slipping into the eardrums with an elegance that eluded luxury. Patricia slowly turned her head. His eyes, hidden behind his glasses, stopped on Elena, sitting there, straight despite the fatigue, her chin high, her fingers dancing on her instrument. A small smile played on his painted lips. Not one of admiration, one of power, one of contempt masked as worldly curiosity. She approached, her heels clicking against the cobblestones with the authority of a self-proclaimed queen. Meredith and Lila followed her like well-trained dogs. "Oh, look at this, girls," she said in a sweet voice, loud enough to be heard. "A little modern slave, with a violin. What a poetic image." The violin stopped abruptly. Elena slowly looked up. Her heart was beating faster, but her face remained impassive. She had heard worse words. But this one, from that mouth, sounded like a slap wrapped in silk. A shiver ran up his spine. Not fear. Not this time. But cold, contained anger. "You want money, don't you?" Patricia continued. "So play something for me." "No. Better, play Dixieland. You know this song, I'm sure of it." Silence fell like an axe. Dixieland, the unofficial anthem of the Confederate States. A racist lullaby disguised as folklore, once sung at planters' dances while slaves picked cotton in the sun. Elena's fingers tightened on the bow for a moment. Her eyes, dark and deep, fixed on Patricia's. "Play, and maybe I'll give you a coin," Patricia added in a mock-magnanimous tone, before throwing a quarter on the ground, like one would throw a treat to a dog. Metal clinked against stone. Around them, passers-by had stopped. Some looked down, embarrassed. Others discreetly took out their phones to film. The air had thickened. The city seemed to hold its breath. Elena closed her eyes. She could have screamed. She could have left. She could have cried. But she chose to do what she did best, speak with her violin. Slowly, she straightened her back, caught her breath. Then, she placed the bow on the strings. But it wasn't Dixieland. It was El Adagio for strings of Samuel Barber. A long breath passed through the invisible assembly. The first notes rose, slow, solemn, like ancient sighs rising from the earth. Music was no longer just music. It was becoming sacred language, silent prayer, elegant revolt. Every vibration told the story of humiliated women, broken men, rusty chains, songs stifled too soon. Patricia frowned. Meredith crossed her arms. Lila wasn't laughing anymore. The audience was growing. An old white man in a suit stopped, his eyes wet. A young black boy, his hand on his chest, slowly nodded his head. A little girl clung to her mother's hand, not understanding, but sensing something serious. The tears flowed, silently. Elena no longer played for a living. She lived to play, to resist, to transform shame into beauty, humiliation into elevation. When the last note faded into the humid air, there was no more sound. Nothing. Even the birds had fallen silent. Then, a slow clap. Frank rose. Then 2. Then 10. Then 100. Patricia, frozen, arms at her sides, no longer knew what to say. Her glasses slid slightly down her nose. She felt naked. Someone had filmed everything. And already, the looks that turned towards her were no longer those of admiration, but of disgust. That day, Patricia Whitmore had wanted to humiliate a woman, but she had awakened a memory. And in the face of this memory, she was only a ghost of privilege, swept away by the power of a bow. Elena, she raised his head. She hadn't just responded to the insult. She had gave silence a voice, and to humiliation, a dignity stronger than any speech. A figure approached the silent circle of spectators. His footsteps on the cobblestones were barely audible, so sacred had the silence become around Elena. The man, tall, elegant, dressed in a perfectly tailored dark suit, walked with purposeful but measured steps. His midnight blue tie rustled in the wind, and his eyes fixed Elena with an intensity that mixed with shock and emotion. As he passed, passers-by instinctively parted, as if a larger-than-life presence were moving through the crowd. "It's James Holloway," someone whispered, impressed. "The director of the Charleston Philharmonic," added another. "He never comes here. It's him, it's really him." The man stopped in front of Elena, who was still holding her violin, her cheeks flushed with effort and emotion. Her eyes were calm, but her heart was beating fast. "Elena Brooks?" he asked finally, his voice trembling with a mixture of disbelief and respect. Elena looked up at him, confused. "Yes," she replied in a soft voice. He gave a slight laugh of surprise, almost pained. "My God, I can't believe my eyes. You were the soloist at our concert in London. The Barbican. That was 7 years ago. You played the Tchaikovsky concerto. I remember it like it was yesterday." A shudder ran through the crowd. Patricia Whitmore, still frozen a few steps away, suddenly paled. Her expression of contempt turned to shock, then to unease. "But what are you doing here?" James asked, upset. Elena hesitated. The words caught in her throat. It wasn't yet time to recount the injustices, the closed doors, the prejudices, the years of erasure. So she contented herself with a discreet smile. James continued. "What you just performed. It was moving. You silenced the entire street. You transformed a humiliation into a work of art. Ms. Brooks, if you agree, I would like you to open our annual gala in 3 weeks. It would be an honor." Thunderous applause erupted. Spontaneous, vibrant, almost liberating. Tears streamed down several faces. A young man in the crowd cried out, "Yes, she deserves the stage, not the street." And suddenly, a clear voice cut through the tumult. "Wait." It was the young woman who had filmed the entire scene. She was now standing in front of Patricia Whitmore, the phone still in her hand. "You're not leaving like that. You humiliated her. You told her to play like a slave. You all heard." She turned to the crowd. "And I filmed it all. Every word." The tension rose. Patricia stammered, took a step back, her face tightening under the weight of the gaze of dozens of witnesses. Her 2 friends had slipped into the crowd, leaving their fallen queen alone to face her shame. James Holloway turned slowly to her, his gaze hard. "Mrs. Whitmore, I advise you to leave. You've done enough harm for one day." The next day, the video exploded on social media. It was shared millions of times. Patricia Whitmore's words were analyzed, denounced, and condemned. Her name became synonymous with racist arrogance. Protests erupted outside her stores. Several brands terminated their collaboration contracts. The hashtag Play Not a Bay went viral, carried by a wave of support for Elena Brooks and all the invisible artists crushed by the privileges of a contemptuous elite. As for Elena, she was no longer playing on the street. 3 weeks later, she walked onto the stage of the prestigious Charleston Philharmonic Gala, wearing a simple dress, violin in hand. The silence in the hall was the same as on the street that day. A sacred silence, ready to welcome the truth of the strings, the nobility of a woman they had tried to erase. She played, and the whole world listened. 3 weeks later, the Charleston Philharmonic's annual gala opened beneath the majestic gilt of the Memminger Theater. The illuminated facade shone like a jewel in the night sky, and guests flocked by the hundreds in their finest attire. The atmosphere was alive with anticipation, but also with a special emotion this year. Everyone knew who would open the evening. As the lights went down, a solemn silence enveloped the room. The murmurs ceased. Then, a halo of light illuminated the center of the stage. And there, straight and still, stood Elena Brooks. She wore a simple black dress, without jewelry or artifice. Nothing that screamed wealth, everything that embodied grace. Her hair was simply tied back, and her violin shone softly in the spotlight. She looked at the audience for a moment, then closed her eyes. Not to flee, but to focus, to gather, in a single breath, the voices of those who had gone before her. Then she played, not for Patricia Whitmore, not to respond to hatred, not for revenge. She played for her mother, who had lulled her to sleep with whispered melodies after work. For her grandmother, who had never seen the inside of a theater, but who had always believed that dignity needed no stage. She played for everyone who had ever been spat on. You are nothing. She made the strings speak as one makes a collective memory speak. The chosen piece was not only beautiful, it was full of meaning, grief, and resilience. Her fingers glided with sovereign mastery, but it was her soul that spoke. In every silence between 2 notes, one could hear the stifled sighs of invisible generations. And in every crescendo, the cry of a people that could no longer be ignored. When the last note died away, the room was struck by an almost sacred silence. It wasn't a lack of reaction, it was shock. The weight of what had just been heard. Then a breath. Then thunderous applause. The audience rose as one. Some wept. Others shouted bravo at the top of their lungs. And in the boxes, patrons, critics, artists, all applauded unrestrainedly, not out of politeness, but out of necessity, because they had just witnessed something greater than music. That evening, Elena found her place in the world again. But she didn't make it a throne. She made it a bridge. Invitations poured in from all over the world: New York, Paris, Tokyo. The media presented her as the symbol of a grace that transcends humiliations. But Elena, true to who she was, refused to become a product. She accepted some concerts, yes, but she devoted her energy to a project close to her heart: the creation of a foundation to teach music to children in neglected neighborhoods, where talent exists, but violins are lacking. Every week she would go to these often neglected schools, open a case, hand a bow to a little girl or boy, and say softly, "You deserve to play. You are worthy of it." E.T. Patricia Whitmore? She slowly disappeared from the landscape. Her stores lost their sponsors. Her friends distanced themselves. She tried for a time to justify herself, to rewrite the facts. But public opinion no longer listened to her. She had become a symbol in spite of herself, the reflection of an ancient world that Elena's silent dignity had just cracked forever. The story of this public humiliation became a textbook case, a subject of debate, a documentary. One truth took root in hearts and minds. Greatness is not achieved by wealth or status. It is revealed in the way you stand, even when others want to make you bow down.